The stars had always called to humanity. For 300 years they had reached upward, building ships, breaking barriers, and finally touching the cold void between worlds. Now, in the year 2347, Captain Una Park stood on the bridge of the horizon's edge and stared at something no human had ever seen before. 300 alien warships hung in space, like silent predators. Each one was larger than anything humanity had ever built. Their hulls glowed with strange energy. Their weapons pointed directly at the small human vessel. Una was 38 years old. She had short black hair and calm eyes that had seen many difficult things. She had grown up in the rebuilt cities of Korea, where her grandmother told her stories of survival and resistance. Those stories lived in her blood. "Captain," said Doyon Kim, her tactical officer. He was a tall man with a serious face. His fingers moved across his console, and his voice was steady, even though fear lived in his heart. "They are scanning us. All 300 ships." "Let them look," Una said. "We have nothing to hide." The communication screen flickered. A face appeared that was not human. It had gray skin, for eyes arranged in a diamond pattern, and no mouth that Una could see. When it spoke, the words came directly into their minds. "I am Admiral Khalees of the Vorn. I speak for the Galactic Concordat. You have entered controlled space. Identify yourselves." Una stepped forward. "I am Captain Una Park of Earth. We come in peace. We wish to establish contact with other intelligent species." There was a long pause. Admiral Kellis seemed to consult with others that Una could not see. When he spoke again, there was something like amusement in his mental voice. "Earth. Yes, we have observed your species for some time. You are young, primitive, but you have achieved faster than light travel. This means you must now be integrated into the Concordat." "Integrated?" Una asked. "The Galactic Concordat has maintained peace for 12 million years. 4,000 species live under our protection. When a new species reaches the stars, they are given a choice. Join us as a client species, accept our guidance and our rules, and live in safety. Or refuse and be destroyed." Dr. Minji Beek, the ship's language expert, leaned close to Una. She was a small woman with glasses and quick eyes. "Captain, I am reading their historical records. Every species that has encountered this choice has accepted. Every single one. For 12 million years?" Una nodded slowly. "Admiral Khalees, what does it mean to be a client species? You will follow our laws. You will contribute resources to the Concordat. You will not expand beyond the systems we assign to you. In return, you will receive protection and technology. It is a fair arrangement. It is the only arrangement." Taiwan Choi, the chief engineer, spoke up. He was an older man with gray at his temples and grease permanently stained into his hands. "Captain, they are not really asking. They are telling, I understand," Una said quietly. Admiral Khalees continued. "You have one planetary rotation to consult with your homeworld. After that, you will give us your answer. I advise you to choose wisely. No species has ever successfully resisted the Concordat. The mathematics of war do not favor the weak." The screen went dark. For a long moment, no one on the bridge spoke. The weight of 300 warships pressed down on them like a physical force. Doyon checked his console again and again, as if hoping the numbers would change. They did not. 47 ships, he said finally. "That is Earth's entire fleet. Against 300? And their ships are larger, faster, and more powerful than anything we have." "The odds are 0, Minji added softly. "There is no scenario in which we survive a fight." Una walked to the observation window and looked out at the alien fleet. Each ship was a work of art, beautiful and terrible. 12 million years of civilization had built those ships. 12 million years of peace through submission. "Contact Earth," she ordered. The next several hours were the longest of Una's life. She spoke with presidents and generals, scientists and philosophers. The whole of humanity debated its future in a single night. Some argued for acceptance. The Concordat offered peace and safety. Why fight against impossible odds? Others argued for resistance. Humanity had not crawled out of the caves and crossed the stars just to kneel. Tywin sat beside Una during a brief rest period. The old engineer sipped cold coffee and stared at nothing. "My grandmother survived the Soul Uprising," he said. "She was 17 years old when foreign soldiers marched through her city. Everyone told her to accept it, to bow, to survive." He paused. She never bowed, not once. "She said that some things are worth more than survival."
Oh.
"Did she ever regret it?" Una asked. Tywin smiled. She lived to be 94 years old. She saw Korea reunited. She saw her children grow up free. She told me on her last day that she would make the same choice 1,000 times. The communication console beeped. Earth had reached its decision. Una read the message. Then she read it again. A strange feeling rose in her chest. It was not quite hope. It was something older and fiercer. "Open a channel to the Concordat fleet," she said. Admiral Kellis appeared on the screen. His 4 eyes focused on Una with cold curiosity. "Captain Park, have you made your decision?" The bridge was silent. Doyen's hands trembled over his console. Minji held her breath. Taiwan watched with eyes that held the memory of his grandmother's stories. Una stood tall. She thought of every human who had ever faced impossible odds. She thought of ancestors who had crossed mountains and oceans, who had survived wars and famines, who had built civilizations from nothing. She thought of her own grandmother, who had carried hope through darkness. "Admiral Khalees," she said, and her voice did not shake. "On behalf of Earth and all humanity, I give you our answer." She paused. The universe held its breath. "No." The word hung in the silence like a gunshot. Admiral Khalees's 4 eyes widened. For a moment, he simply stared, as if he could not process what he had heard. "Repeat that," he said. "Nope," Una said again. "We will not submit. We will not become your client species. We will not kneel. You understand that this means war? You understand that you cannot win?" Una smiled. It was a small smile, tired but unbroken. "We understand. And we still say no." The communication ended. The 300 warships hung in space, motionless with shock. In 12 million years, no species had ever said that word, until now. The word traveled faster than light. It moved through communication channels and whispered networks, through official reports and secret messages. Within 3 days, every corner of the galaxy knew what had happened. A new species had said no. Admiral Kellis stood before the High Senate of the Concordat. The Senate chamber was enormous, built into an artificial moon that orbited the capital world. Representatives from 4,000 species sat in rising tiers, their forms ranging from insectoid to crystalline to things that had no name in any human language. "Explain this," commanded the eldest senator. He was a being of pure thought, housed in a geometric crystal that floated above his seat. He had lived for 600,000 years and had never heard of such a thing. A species refused integration? How is this possible? Kellis kept his 4 eyes fixed on the floor. "The humans are unlike any species we have encountered. They are weak, short-lived, and technologically inferior. But when presented with our ultimatum, they did not calculate their odds of survival. They simply refused." Murmurs rippled through the Senate. Species that had not spoken to each other in millennia now whispered in confusion. "Then destroy them," said a representative from the merchant guilds. His species were traders who had accepted client status 8 million years ago. They had grown wealthy under Concordat protection. "Make an example. Show the galaxy what happens to those who refuse." "We will," Kellis said, "but there is a complication." "What complication?" "The word has spread. The client species are talking. They are asking questions they have not asked in millions of years. They are asking why they submitted. They are asking what would happen if they said no." The Senate chamber fell silent. The eldest senator's crystal flickered with what might have been concern, far from the Senate. On a trading station called Nexus Prime, a woman named Haisung No sat across a table from 3 members of the Merchant Guild. Haisung was 42 years old. With silver streaks in her hair and a face that had learned to hide its feelings, She had been a diplomat for 20 years, and she had never faced a negotiation like this. The guild members were soft-bodied creatures with too many arms. Their translator devices rendered their words in flat, emotionless tones. The contract is simple, the lead merchant said. Earth will provide 30% of its mineral output to the guild. In exchange, you will receive basic trading rights within Concordat space. Xung studied the document. The terms were not fair. They were not even close to fair. Earth would be stripped of resources while receiving almost nothing in return. This contract gives the guild complete control over our trade routes, she said. We would be dependent on you for everything. That is correct. It is the standard arrangement for new species. Every client has signed similar contracts. Haisung thought of the message she had received that morning. It was short, just a few words from Captain Unipark. We said no. Whatever happens next, remember who we are.
Oh.
She pushed the contract back across the table. No, she said. The merchants froze. Their many arms stopped moving. Their translator devices clicked and hummed as if searching for a different meaning. You refuse? I refuse. These terms are not acceptable. If the guild wants to trade with Earth, they will offer fair terms, or we will not trade at all. You cannot refuse. No one refuses the guild. Haisung stood up. She gathered her documents and walked toward the door. At the threshold, she paused and looked back. Someone just did. On a Concordat research station in a distant star system, an engineer named Jun Hoshin faced a similar moment. He was young, only 26, with clever hands and a mind that understood machines better than people. He had been assigned to the station as part of a cultural exchange, which really meant that the Concordat wanted to study human technology. His supervisor was a tall, insectoid creature named Vexus. Vexus had compound eyes that reflected light in strange patterns and a voice like rustling paper. Engineer Shin Vexus said, "You will access the computer systems of the Mora delegation. You will copy their research data and deliver it to me." The Mora. But they are our partners on this station. We work together. The Mora are a client species who have grown too ambitious. The Concordat requires their research. You will obtain it. That is stealing. I will not do it. Vexus's compound eyes focused on Junho with sudden intensity. You refuse? Do you understand the consequences? You could be imprisoned. You could be sent back to your primitive world in disgrace. Junho thought about it. He thought about his family back on Earth, about his mother who had always told him to be honest, about his father who had taught him that some things were more important than safety. I understand, he said, and I still refuse. Vexus made a sound that might have been anger or might have been confusion. In 12 million years, no worker on a Concordat station had ever refused a direct order. The word spread further. On a transport ship, carrying client species, workers, a human named Bora Lee refused to give up her seat to a high-status alien. No, she said simply, and did not move. On a border world, human merchant named Sun Ho, you refused to pay a bribe to local officials. No, he said, and took his business elsewhere. Each refusal was small. Each one alone meant nothing. But together, they formed a pattern. They formed a message. They showed the galaxy something it had forgotten. It was possible to say no. The client species began to remember. They were the Mora, who had been conquered 6 million years ago. They were the Kel, who had surrendered without a fight. They were 1,000 other species who had chosen submission because they believed they had no other choice. Now they wondered. In hidden meeting places, encrypted channels, they shared the stories of human refusal. They spoke the word to each other like a secret password. No, it felt strange on their tongues. It felt dangerous. It felt like waking up from a very long sleep. The eldest senator of the Concordat felt the change. He had lived for 600,000 years, and he had never felt anything like this. It was like a vibration running through the structure of everything. A crack forming in a wall that had stood for 12 million years. What have these humans done? He asked the empty chamber. No one answered. But the answer was spreading across the galaxy, one word at a time. No. The word was small. The word was simple. But it carried something that the Concordat had spent 12 million years trying to eliminate. It carried hope and hope. As the eldest senator was beginning to understand, was the most dangerous weapon in the universe. The cell was white and cold. Soyin Kong sat in its center, her hands folded in her lap, her eyes closed. She was 53 years old, a historian who had spent her life studying the ways that civilizations rose and fell. Now she was a prisoner. They had taken her from a diplomatic vessel 3 weeks ago. No charges, no explanation. Just armored soldiers and a long journey through the dark between stars. She understood why. The Concordat was afraid, and when powerful beings became afraid, they reached for the things they did not understand. The door opened with a soft hiss. 2 guards entered, followed by a floating platform that carried the eldest senator himself. His crystal body caught the light and split it into rainbows that danced across the walls. Soyin Kong, the senator said. His voice existed directly in her mind, bypassing her ears entirely. Historian of Earth, you have been brought here to answer questions? Soyin opened her eyes. She did not stand. She did not bow. I have questions of my own, she said. Why am I here? What do you want? The senator's crystal flickered. Perhaps it was annoyance. Perhaps it was curiosity. Your species has done something unprecedented. In 12 million years of galactic history, no species has refused the Concordat's offer. We must understand why. You study the past. You study the patterns of civilizations. Explain your people to us. Soyin considered the question. She thought about all the books she had read, all the lectures she had given, all the hours spent trying to understand why humans did the things they did. You want to know why we said no? She said. Double quotes. Yes. The answer is simple. We could not imagine saying anything else. The senator floated closer. That is not an answer. That is a feeling. We need logic. We need understanding. Your species is weak. Your technology is primitive. Your lives are short. You cannot defeat us in war. The mathematics are clear. Submission is the only rational choice. Soyin smiled. It was a tired smile, but it held something that the senator could not identify. You have made a mistake, she said. You have confused rationality with wisdom. You have confused mathematics with meaning? Explain. Soyin stood up. She walked to the wall of her cell and placed her hand against the cold surface. Let me tell you about my grandmother, she said. She was born in a small village in the mountains of Korea. When she was a child, a war came. Foreign soldiers burned her village. Her family had nothing. They had no weapons, no army, no hope of victory. The rational choice was to accept defeat. She turned to face the senator. My grandmother walked barefoot across frozen mountains. She carried her baby brother on her back. She ate bark and grass to survive. It took her 3 months to reach safety. Half the people who started that journey died along the way. It was not rational. It was not logical. But she did it anyway. Why? Because surrender was not in her vocabulary. Because she would rather die free than live as a slave. Because humans are not rational beings. We are stubborn, foolish, proud creatures who would rather fail standing than succeed on our knees. The senator was silent for a long moment. His crystal body hummed with processing power as he tried to understand. This is inefficient, he said finally. This is wasteful. Your grandmother could have accepted the occupation. She could have survived easily. Why risk death for something as abstract as freedom? Because freedom is not abstract to us. It is as real as food and water. Without it, we are not truly alive. You would die for an idea? We would die for many ideas. Freedom, justice, love, hope. These are not just words to us. They are the reasons we exist. The senator floated back. His crystal body flickered rapidly, patterns of light chasing each other across its surface. This is madness, he said. No species in the Concordat thinks this way. We have bred such impulses out of ourselves. They serve no purpose. They lead only to suffering and death. Soyen laughed. It was a genuine laugh, full of something the senator could not name. And how has that worked for you? Look at your concordat. 4,000 species, and not one of them has created anything new in millions of years. You have peace, yes. You have order. But you have no passion. No art, no dreams. You exist, but you do not live. We have survived. So has a rock. Survival is not enough for humans. We want more. We want to grow, to learn, to become better than we are. We want to reach the edge of the universe and see what lies beyond. We want to ask questions that have no answers and seek answers that cannot be found. The senator considered her words. For the first time in centuries, he felt something like doubt. And this is why you said no? Because of these abstract desires? No, Soyen said. We said no because saying yes would have meant giving up everything that makes us human. We said no because we would rather be a small, free people than a large, enslaved one. We said no because our ancestors said no, and their ancestors before them. It is in our blood. It is in our bones. It is who we are. She stepped closer to the senator, close enough to see her own reflection in his crystal surface. You have been alive for 600,000 years, she said. In all that time, have you ever refused anything? Have you ever stood against the tide and said, I will not move? Have you ever loved something so much that you would die rather than lose it? The senator did not answer. He could not answer. Such concepts were alien to him as his form was to Soyen. That is the difference between us, she said. You have forgotten what it means to want something. You have forgotten what it means to fight. You look at us and see a weak species with no chance of victory. But you are wrong. We are not weak. We are simply young, and we are hungry. The senator retreated to the door. His crystal body had dimmed, its light somehow diminished. The Senate will order your species destroyed, he said. It is the only logical response. Then we will fight, and we will lose. And our children will keep fighting, and their children after them. You can destroy our ships and burn our worlds, but you cannot destroy the idea we carry. The idea that it is possible to say no. The senator left without another word, but as he traveled back to the Senate chamber, he found that he could not stop thinking about the human woman and her grandmother who had walked across frozen mountains. For the first time in his long existence, the eldest senator was afraid, not of the humans themselves. They were weak, primitive, easily destroyed. He was afraid of what they represented. He was afraid of the spark in Soyen Kong's eyes. He was afraid of a single word that had suddenly become more dangerous than any weapon. He was afraid because, somewhere deep in his ancient crystal mind, a small voice was asking a question he had never asked before. What if she was right? The fleet that came to destroy Earth was the largest ever assembled. 10,000 warships gathered at the edge of the solar system, their weapons charged, their commanders ready. Against them stood 47 human vessels, each one small and fragile compared to the alien giants. Captain Jiwan Han stood on the bridge of the Defender, Earth's flagship. He was 45 years old, with a soldier's bearing and a poet's heart. His father had been a fisherman. His mother had been a teacher. Neither of them had ever imagined that their son would be humanity's last line of defense. Status report, he said. His first officer, a woman named Yoonji Lim, checked her console. All 47 ships in position. Weapons online. Shields at maximum. She paused. Captain, our weapons will not penetrate their shields. Our shields will not stop their weapons. We cannot win this fight. I know, Jiwan said. We fight anyway, may I ask why? Giwan looked out at the endless field of enemy ships. Each one was a death sentence. Each one carried enough firepower to burn cities. 'Cause someone has to be first, he said. Someone has to show that it is possible to stand. Even if we fall, the next generation will stand. And the next. Eventually, they will get tired of knocking us down. The communication console beeped. Giwan expected a demand for surrender. Instead, the signal was encrypted, using a code that no human had created. Unknown transmission, Yunji reported. It is coming from inside the Concordat fleet. Jiwan frowned. Put it through. The screen flickered. A face appeared that was neither human nor Concordat. It was round and soft, with large eyes that seemed too big for its head. Its skin was blue-gray, and its voice was high and musical. Human commander, it said. I am eldest Ren of the Mara. We need to talk. The Mara, Yunji whispered. They have been client species for 6 million years. They are the oldest subjugated race in the Concordat. Juan leaned forward. I am listening, eldest Ren. We have heard what your species has done. We have heard the word you spoke. For 6 million years, my people have served the Concordat. We have built their ships and worked their factories and died in their wars. We told ourselves that we had no choice. We told ourselves that this was simply the way of things. Ren's large eyes glistened with something that might have been tears. Then you came. You small, weak, short-lived creatures. And you said the word that we had forgotten existed. You reminded us that submission is a choice. You reminded us that we once knew how to refuse.
What are you saying?
Jiwan asked. I am saying that my people are tired. 6 million years is enough. Today, the Mara remember who they were. The communication ended. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, impossibly, ships began to break formation in the Concordat fleet. Not many at first. A dozen more vessels, their engines turning away from Earth. But then more followed. Ships crewed by the Kel, another ancient client species. Ships crewed by the Ven and the Asari, and a dozen other races whose names Jiwan did not know. Captain Yunji said, her voice shaking. Over 300 ships have broken formation. They are not attacking us. On Nexus Prime, Haisuno watched the news feeds with disbelief. The trading station had erupted into chaos. Workers who had served their masters for generations were suddenly refusing orders. They did not fight. They did not riot. They simply stopped working. The docking systems require maintenance, a supervisor shouted. Return to your posts immediately. No, said a worker. The food processors need operators. This is your duty, no, said another. You will be punished. You will lose your privileges, no, said a third. And a fourth. And 100th, the word spread through the station like wildfire. It was not a revolution. It was something stranger and more powerful. It was an awakening. Haisung found herself standing in the main plaza, surrounded by thousands of beings from dozens of species. Some were tall, some were small, some had shapes that human eyes could barely understand. But all of them were saying the same word. No, they said it to unfair contracts and unreasonable demands. They said it to centuries of exploitation and millennia of submission. They said it to the voice in their heads that told them resistance was impossible. On the research station, Yunhoshin watched his supervisor Vexus receive emergency communications. The insectoid creature's compound eyes flickered with something that might have been panic. Multiple systems reporting worker refusals, Vexus muttered. Production has halted in 17 sectors. The Senate is demanding explanations. He turned to Junho. This is your fault. You humans and your word. It was not our word, Junho said quietly. It belongs to everyone. We just reminded them. Back at the edge of Earth's solar system, the battle had transformed. The Concordat fleet was fracturing. Some ships still advanced toward Earth, loyal to the Senate. Others had turned away. And some, incredibly, had positioned themselves between Earth and the attackers. Admiral Khalees appeared on Giwan's screen. The Vorn's for eyes were wild with confusion. What is happening? He demanded. My fleet is disobeying orders. My soldiers are refusing to fight. This is impossible. This has never happened. It is happening now, Jiwan said. You have poisoned them. You have infected them with your madness, gave them hope. We showed them that another way was possible. The communication cut off. Through the observation window, Giwan watched as the impossible unfolded. Ships that had served the Concordat for millions of years were now defending humanity. Workers who had never known freedom were now claiming it. The battle, when it came, was brief and strange. The loyal Concordat forces found themselves outnumbered by their own former servants. Ships that had once fought side by side now faced each other across the void and throughout it all. Across the galaxy, the word kept spreading. No to injustice. No to submission. No to the idea that peace required slavery. When the fighting ended, more than 2,000 Concordat ships had been destroyed. But Earth still stood. And for the first time in 12 million years, the Galactic Concordat had been challenged not by an external enemy, but by its own people. Captain Una Park, still aboard the Horizon's Edge, received a transmission from Captain Ji-Wan Han. "It worked," he said. His voice was exhausted but triumphant. "They remembered, Captain. They remembered how to say no." Una closed her eyes. She thought of her grandmother and all the others who had refused to bow. She thought of every human who had stood against tyranny, knowing they could not win but standing anyway. "It was never just about us," she said. "It was about showing them what was possible." Outside her window, ships from 100 species gathered in formation. Former enemies had become allies. Former slaves had become free beings. The galaxy had changed in a single day, but Una knew that this was only the beginning. The Concordat still existed. The Senate still held power. The war for freedom had just begun, and yet as she looked at the fleet of the hopeful, she felt something she had not felt since that first moment of contact. She felt hope. 1 year had passed. Since the Battle of Earth, the galaxy was no longer the same. The Galactic Concordat had collapsed like a building whose foundations had rotted away. For 12 million years, it had stood on a single principle, that submission was the only rational choice. When that principle shattered, everything built upon it fell. The eldest senator had dissolved himself. His crystal body had simply stopped functioning one day, and the other senators found only a brief message in his memory banks. She was right. I wasted 600,000 years in the Concordat's place. Something new was growing. They called it the Free Systems Alliance. It was not an empire. It was not a collection of master and servant species. It was something that had not existed in the galaxy for 12 million years. It was a partnership. Ambassador Una Park stood at the podium of the first assembly of free species. The chamber was enormous, built in the ruins of the old Senate Hall. Representatives from over 2,000 species filled the seats, their forms as varied as the stars themselves. Beside Una stood her old crew. Doyon Kim, no longer a tactical officer, but now Earth's military advisor. Minji Beek, the xenolinguist who had helped write the Alliance's founding documents. Taiwan Choi, the engineer whose grandmother's stories had helped inspire a revolution. Also present were the heroes of the uprising. Haisung No, who had walked away from the Merchant Guild's table. Junho Shin, who had refused to steal from his partners. Giwan Han, who had commanded humanity's defense. Soyin Kong, who had shown the eldest senator what it's meant to be human. And throughout the chamber sat representatives of the species that had remembered how to say no. The Mara, with their large eyes and gentle voices. The Kel, the Ven, the Asari, and hundreds of others. Each one had their own story. Each one had made their own choice. Una looked out at the assembly and felt the weight of the moment. 1 year ago, humanity had been a small species on the edge of destruction. Now they stood at the center of something new. "Friends," she said. "Allies. Former enemies. I stand before you not as a conqueror, but as an equal." Humanity did not defeat the Concordat. We simply reminded the galaxy of something it had forgotten.
Ouch.
She paused. The chamber was absolutely silent. For 12 million years, the Concordat maintained peace through submission. They told you that resistance was futile. They told you that the only rational choice was to kneel. And for 12 million years, you believed them. Then we came. A young species, primitive and weak. We had nothing to offer except one thing, the memory of what it meant to refuse. We carried that memory in our blood, passed down from generation to generation. Our ancestors said no to empires and tyrants, to slavery and injustice. They did not always win, but they never stopped fighting. A young delegate from the Mara raised her hand. She was small, even for her species, and her voice was soft. "Ambassador Park, may I ask a question?" "Of course. How did you know?" "When you faced the Concordat fleet, when you said the word that changed everything, how did you know it would work?" Una smiled. It was the same tired, unbroken smile that she had worn when she first said no to Admiral Khalees. "I did not know," she admitted. "None of us did. We expected to die. We expected to be destroyed, and our children to be destroyed, and our world to be burned. We said no anyway." "Why?" Una looked at her old crew. Doyen, who had calculated 0% odds and fought anyway. Mingi, who had translated words of defiance into 100 languages. Taiwan, who carried his grandmother's stubbornness in his heart. "Because some things are more important than survival," she said. "Because we would rather die as free beings than live as slaves? Because we could not look at our children and tell them that we gave up without a fight?" She turned back to the full assembly. "This is what we offer the Free Systems Alliance. Not weapons. Not technology. Not the power to conquer. We offer you the memory of refusal. We offer you the knowledge that submission is a choice, and that another choice is always possible." Another delegate spoke up. He was a Kel, a species of tall, thin beings with skin like bark. "Ambassador, the old Concordat brought peace. Millions of years without major war. Some say that we have traded security for chaos." "That is true," Una said. "The path we have chosen is harder. There will be conflicts. There will be struggles. Freedom is never easy." She stepped out from behind the podium and walked into the center of the chamber. "But let me ask you this. In the last 1,000,000 years of the Concordat, what great works were created? What new ideas were born? What songs were sung that had never been sung before?" Silence. "The Concordat gave you peace, but it took away your purpose. It gave you security, but it took away your dreams. You survived, but you did not live." She raised her hand and her crew joined her in the center of the chamber. "Look at us. Humans live less than 100 years. We are weak and fragile and foolish. In the time it takes one of you to finish breakfast, entire human generations are born and die. And yet, in our brief existence, we have created wonders. We have painted and sung and dreamed and loved. We have asked questions that have no answers and sought answers that cannot be found. We have burned with life. This is what freedom gives you. Not safety, not comfort, but purpose, meaning the chance to become something greater than you are." She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of 1,000 different species. "Today, we begin something new. Not an empire built on submission, but an alliance built on choice. Each species will govern itself. Each world will determine its own path. We will disagree. We will argue. We will sometimes fail. We will be free. And that freedom will make us stronger than any empire could ever be." The chamber erupted. It was not applause. Exactly, many of the species present had no hands to clap. But it was approval expressed in 1,000 different ways. Lights flickered and colors flashed and sounds rose and fell in harmonies that human ears could barely comprehend. Una returned to the podium. There was one more thing she needed to say. In the archives of this assembly, there is a record of humanity's first contact with the galaxy. It describes a small species from an unremarkable star who refused to submit. The archivists have asked me what should be added to that record now. She smiled. I told them to write this: humanity, the species that taught the galaxy to say no. The assembly rose. 2,000 species, standing together, united not by force, but by choice. The sound they made was like nothing Una had ever heard. It was the sound of freedom, long forgotten but finally remembered. Outside the assembly hall, the stars burned on in their eternal silence. But something had changed. The galaxy was no longer a place of submission and obedience. It was a place of possibility, and it had all started with one word. One small, simple, human word. No. Why Una Park looked up at the stars and thought of her grandmother. She thought of all the humans who had said no throughout history, who had refused to kneel even when kneeling was the only rational choice. "Thank you," she whispered to them. "Thank you for teaching us." Then she turned and walked into the future, surrounded by friends and allies from 1,000 different worlds. The galaxy would never be the same, and that was exactly what humanity had intended.